Good afternoon, everyone, on this absolutely gorgeous day in Boston, wherever you are. I hope that it's as beautiful with all the rain and now the sun and 82 degrees. It couldn't be nicer. And a wonderful backdrop to be able to share with you, which I don't think we've ever done before, a discussion of the Fine Choices exhibition. My guess is that this has probably gone for about 40 of the 58 years of the gallery, where we decided each summer to devote a period of time to showing one work by each of the artists that the gallery has represented. And this year we've done the same thing with Fine Choices 2025, the cover of which will about appear on the screen in a moment. And to say that it began as an idea to reflect on the art that we had been selecting and sharing. And now, after 58 years, it's pretty substantial. The one difficult note for me is, as I walked through the show the other day, is that a number of the artists whose works we continue to exhibit have died. And yet, in a very wonderful way, their work continues, and having it in the gallery is an important way to remember them, to remember what they contributed to our lives, and to honor their art. So without talking anymore, let me just welcome you to this and Fine Choices 2025. There is a quote that I like very much from Brother Thomas to begin it with, and the cover piece is his. Art is something seen about something unseen. And I must say that in each of the artists, and we've only chosen 8 or 10 or 12 examples from this show, and there are over 50 pieces in the exhibit. That idea that you're both looking at something and beyond what you are seeing is the spirit of the maker. So let's look at the whole piece by Brother Thomas in 2 different views. And if I could, Mara, would you begin by just responding to this rather exceptional piece?
Well, it is rather exceptional. Its proportions are exquisite. I particularly like how broad the shoulders and chest of the vest are, and then how it really tapers down in a very refined way. And then these cloud-like applications of glaze with the perfectly set interior set lid, which picks up the color of the glaze. So you're moving from rim back inside, inside the piece, inside the hauler, inside the collar. And it reiterates the shape, this time with a very thin neck and then branching out over to the lid's shoulders. The sort of opal blue with a red copper glaze, and how that red copper glaze burns out to purple at the end, so that you've got this incredible harmonious analogous color happening. And of course, the magic of glaze is what it does to the kill itself. For all of Brother Thomas's skill, and his skill particularly with the wheel and balance and proportion, in setting the silhouette of the piece, is one set of skills that are sort of verifiable at the moment you make them. But there's this magic of alchemy that the ceramicist has with applying glazes, knowing more or less how they work, how they operate, but then what happens in the fire and how the fire makes the piece. And I don't know, his pieces, I think, are the perfect manifestation of the spirit of the person in physical form.
That's such a beautiful way to describe the art and the person himself. Sam, you and Thomas had a very beautiful friendship over quite a period of time. And if you would just reflect on that and on the piece itself, I'd be very grateful.
Of course, I must say I miss him here. I have several of his works. There is a little photograph of him. He looks at me, he smiles at me. I see him every day. And I must say that when I look at works of art and I try find words to tell you what I feel about them, I feel that I not only speak about about the works of art, I also speak about myself. So I'm a little embarrassed. I feel somehow in this work that there is a connection of two extremes. On one hand, there is a perfect shape of the pot, which is very rigorous, and then there is this embrace of this dark shape. There is a kind of a loving embrace. And what does this dark shape be, tell me? It tells me, first of all, that this pot belongs somehow to the 70s or the 80s of the century. I'm thinking of artists that were doing art with stains of color. Helen Frankenthaler, Jenkins, I'm not speaking of Jackson Pollock, but all these people who have allowed color just to make stains. And then I look at these stains and I see a whole planet. I look here at the right, there are two pink mountains, and then there is, of course, the reflection of the photographer's screen.
Right.
And all this brings life to it. So it's and behind this stands the smiling face of Brother Thomas with his very rigorous feeling for perfection, the one who breaks down some things which are not 100% to his liking. So it's a whole experience to look at it for me.
And I think that when you two corresponded, when first of all, after you had been diagnosed, and then you were in touch over that period of time, it was a deepening of an already wonderful friendship that had to do with regard for one another. I know that you felt that 2,000 years from now, Thomas's work would be still
Absolutely.
appreciated. And similarly, he felt that about your work. And it wasn't to build up the ego of one another, it was quite a genuine perception. And the benefit, clearly, on the side of the gallery was that we were able to watch that friendship and to be nourished by it. Rusty, you had
Oh,
a particular friendship as well with Thomas that I think is more than relevant.
Well, Thomas was a wonderful human being, had a great sense of humor. And he, much like Sam, if Sam's talking to you or Thomas was speaking to you, he was looking you right in the eye and speaking to you. He wasn't looking over your shoulder or wondering who else. It was a very direct conversation. So he was a wonderful human being. I only regret that we can't show more. We will have an exhibition of Thomas's work. Caroline has written the essay for that, and she should speak to this. But I say that because Thomas had an incredible palette of colors that he worked with and shapes. When you look at the collection of pieces of Thomas in the gallery and compare it to some of the Japanese artists, American artists, all excellent, excellent potters, Thomas is the most diverse group of shapes, number one, and then the most diverse shape of colors, number two. So he had an incredible palette of expression. But as Sam said, he broke 90% of the pieces when they came out of his kiln because they didn't have for him what he felt was the spiritual sense of beauty. Really, beauty was very important to him, not beauty like who's good looking in a mirror. Beauty that's a spiritual inner beauty, and the pieces he made needed to sort of have that resonance with him, and if they didn't, he destroyed them. So the pieces that we have are selected by Thomas for that purpose and represent both amazing coloration, as Mara's talked about, and shape that you just don't see in any other potter.
And Caroline, since you're the youngest voice and also a practitioner, at least in clay, of sculpture, and wrote the essay, your thoughts.
Well, I love everything. I mean, Mara and Sam just really wrapped a lot around this piece that I think they just hit the nail on the head. Brother Thomas's work, I think, really brings, especially when you see it in the gallery and everything's different, but even the things that are similar in shape, he kind of makes a point to show they're all a little different. He even made lids that were different inside and out, and it just kind of, it touches on a reality that nothing is the same, but it is the same. And I think that's just the fun in Brother Thomas's pieces, as well as his capture of the spirit. I'll stop there because I could keep going. But
Well, I think we all could. I would just say a couple
Yeah.
of things that, one, the past when we first met him, and he literally, over the 23 years when he and I corresponded by fax daily, and with his work and with his persona, created a whole new direction and possibility for the gallery, which never would have happened were it not for that relationship. So for that, I'm extraordinarily grateful, obviously, and we've now published 5 books of his quotations as day books. The other thing I'd mention is that we're in the midst of working with a middle school and now high school for girls in Rwanda, which has done an extraordinary job of STEM education, and they have not done as good a job including STEAM, namely the art. The entryway to creating a relationship around art has become the work of Brother Thomas. And just today, I received a note from the person who's at Tufts University helping us with this project, and her presentation to the Benedictine sisters who run the school and teach there were quotations from Brother Thomas, images of Brother Thomas's works, and an essay and presentation by Andrew Maskey on Brother Thomas. So the notion of being able to take something as simple as a pot and his quotations and begin to continue its life in the world has been one of the great joys of the gallery. And clearly, Brother Thomas is a great part of that. We can move on, please. So, Sam, you're basically responsible for encouraging my addiction to the work of Saul Steinberg. And
My admiration of Steinberg is very ancient, because when I was in art school, which means it's about 70 years ago, we looked upon him as a wonderful artist, cartoonist, and so on. For me, he became one of the most important artists of the 20th century. He is, for me, somebody I admire. And I must say that when I look at this work, I hear music. I can hear the music of the beauty of every stroke, hear how one theme develops into a second, into a third, into a fourth. And those 4 ladies packed with money that are offering now money for all kinds of cultural things which have lost the government's approval. They're absolutely extraordinary.
it's so lovely. So he actually was born in Romania, was studying architecture in Milan when Mussolini came to power and realized that he couldn't stay there as a Jew, and tried to emigrate to the United States and was held up in the Dominican Republic in 43, 44, but he was already doing drawings at that point for a newspaper that was published by Marshall Fields. This piece is only 2 years after he arrived in the United States. And his capacity to capture the presence of these ladies, Sam, I love the fact that they're all fundraising, in your view, with such ease. And then look at the quality of the line in each one of them. So, Mara, what are your responses to this?
I want to grow up and be one of these ladies. There's a very famous photograph of 2 women entering the Metropolitan Opera by the photographer Ouija. And often it's just the 2 women with their diadems and their furs and their aging necks and their gloves. But if you pan out, and it's cropped to those 2 women, but if you pan out, there's a beggar woman just sort of staring at them, like this. They're the jewels, the motifs of the gloves and the feathers and the fascinators in their hair and these beak-like, feathered necks, but I look at my neck now, and as the great Nora Ephron said, I hate my neck. And so now I sort of like to sit on screen like this so that no one can actually look at my 70-year-old neck. It's so spot on, and the quality of line and the rhythm structures of the lines and the facility. There's not a hesitation on this piece. There's just, when an artist is so sure of their stroke and they just lay it down, that kind of panache in making just sends me. I just love it.
Absolutely. All the things that you have said certainly resonate with every time. So all these pieces are bought in an aftermarket, obviously. He's been dead for quite a while. He gave 3,000 of his drawings and 250 of his rubber stamps, which he used in many pieces, to Yale. All that said, there's still 4,000 works in the world. And occasionally ones come up like this that we just recently acquired, and they're just joyous. There is such an presence to each one of these figures. And just looking at it carefully on the screen, look at either their necklaces or their fans or their furs. It is just filled with an incredible amount of joy and vigor. Rusty?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that the lines. I mean, just imagine there are not many lines. Really, there are not that many lines here. The bodies, for instance, are just a quick line down and across, or whatever, and all the detail is up in the head, the neck, the feathers. But it's just an amazing ability to capture something with those lines. And the other piece we don't have up here is a group of individuals looking at art in the art gallery that captures the same sort of sense of, and he would write things and you'd say, oh, they're talking to each other. What are they saying? And it was nonsense. The words didn't say anything. The idea was simply that they're talking, and whatever they're talking about probably isn't terribly relevant, but it was the same sort of emotion that he captured so simplistically. I really love drawing and drawings like this because they do capture so much with so little.
Absolutely. All joy. And we
I would
just,
like just to add something because
please.
this looks funny, but it's also tragic. It's very sad. It's about aging. And I just wanted to add a word about it because we look at Steinbeck very often and we smile, but we forget that he is sometimes very sad and even sometimes very tragic
Yeah.
with these enormous landscapes with little individuals that are lost in them and they have absolutely no right for life. They depend on all kinds of stamps, on all kinds of certificates that allow them things. So Steinbeck hides with this very ironic and funny uh, world, a world that is very tragic. And he came from Europe, he came from Romania, he studied in Italy. One of the things that we had a common friend, Leo Leoni, was a friend of mine in Italy. He's the man who created the Family of Men. You certainly know the book of Leo Leoni. Um, uh, he's told me so many times, you must meet Saul Steinberg because he has this European vision of America. But well, all this is a world far away.
The reality, Sam, is that of all the other artists in the gallery, the two of you, Steinberg and you, seem to be able to self-generate the ideas that are already in your head and sharing them. So his is a continuity of discussions, observations, just as your paintings remain a constant reminder of the world that we're living in, the world that we have lived in, And I'm not going to go to the future based upon some of the recent paintings. But the notion that there is an inner thread that inspires the work itself is rare amongst all of the artists that we've ever worked with. And Steinberg and you certainly uh, work together in that way. So I'm grateful to you for introducing his work. On we go. Hideaki Miyamura, I think, has been now with the gallery for close to 30 years. He studied here in the United States for college, went back to Japan and did a 6-year apprenticeship. During the last year, he calculated that he threw 10,000 pieces for his master, who then glazed it and sold it as his. So he developed an extraordinary proficiency in throwing, then came back here, was making small sake cups, and realized that there was a greater calling. And I think also seeing Thomas's work encouraged him. So, Caroline, would you like to respond to this piece first?
Absolutely. I adore Hideaki's work, especially, I mean, his glazes. The forms themselves are very, they're much more inspired by Italian glassware. I think one of his favorite things is when people think that his pots are glass or metal instead of ceramics, which can easily happen. The iridescence that is on the hare's fur, the blue and purple iridescent section, I mean, it's just magnificent. It's otherworldly. The hare's fur, and that's hare, Hare, like the rabbit, which of course isn't a hare, but that's what it alludes to. Is, I mean, it's a glaze that's like 1,000 years old, out of, I think, the Song dynasty in China. So they've always been revered. I don't think people totally understood them for a while. It takes a bit to understand the chemistry behind it, and that's Hide's specialty. I know he did an insane amount of work to find this glaze and to make it his, and there's nothing like it. The texture, the color. I'll stop there, but there's just nothing like it. I mean, it's a mountain with a beautiful top snow cap, and he just captures that in this fairly small. I mean, it's not a small vase, but it's a small item, but it captures that magnificence.
Thank you. Mara?
Well, there is a whole landscape to this piece. The mountain range, the mountain top, the crenellations and fissures. How he moves his glaze in this pattern, because there will be 4 points coming down that has the brown that brings one glaze into the hare's fur glaze. So the brown edge between the snow cap and the hare furs. It makes these openings of mystery for me. Mystery about what this landscape is, mystery about how this long, thin neck comes down and embraces this fat body. How 2 very, very, very different feeling glazes are married masterfully when they, in my mind, really should go together.
It's almost like heaven comes down to earth.
Yep.
In these
Yeah,
pieces.
or earth comes up to the heavens, or and again, the refinement of the neck, the thinness of the porcelain, the bulk of the body, and then the refinement of the foot again. It astonishes. I mean, from a technical point, it astonishes, and from an aesthetic and emotional point, it's sort of a heart sing for me when I see work this accomplished and this beautiful, truly beautiful.
It's interesting because I've watched his work now over the past 3 decades, and as with Thomas's work, it doesn't happen by itself. It happens by working every day in the studio, working, and developing glazes. One of my favorite moments was maybe 4 years ago when Hideaki came up to me and said, "You know, Bernie, when I first came here, I was trying to copy other people's glazes. Now they're trying to copy mine. And I just love the fact that it was really just a delightful moment.
There is
To
there is underneath this piece another glaze. The hare's fur stops, and there is a very smooth. So if you to pick this piece up, hare's fur has a little bit of texture to it as you rub it. Underneath is totally smooth. So if you pick this up with your hands, you've almost got the water coming to the earth, coming to the clouds. There are three different ways that this piece has been fired or glazed, not fired but glazed, that go even beyond the two that you see right there. But he makes immaculate pieces, as Mara was talking about, the how this neck. I mean, he doesn't have a huge variety of different pieces, but what he does make is just absolutely beautiful. It's symmetrical and interesting because of how he constructs them. But just a wonderful. He uses a lot of crystal glazes, but the crystal glaze can pop and be very big. He uses little tiny miniature aspects to crystal glazes in some of his work that you wouldn't know them as crystal glazes unless you look very carefully at them. So he's really a master.
It's
Yeah.
Wonderful.
beautifully photographed also. I must say, let me just add a little personal thing. When I looked at it for the first time, I thought of the old movie of Pavlova, dancing the dance of the swan,
Hmm.
a ballerina. I don't know why, but when I looked at it, I saw the supreme elegance, something that is beyond human, and it is, and the more I look at it, I see Pavlova. I see this fabulous dancer.
Wonderful.
I don't know, because of the neck, an extraordinary neck, because of her little white dress and the beautiful long legs. Well, it's very personal,
But
very personal view.
it's lovely. I'm sure Hide will be happy to know that he called up that association for you. I'm going to share a quote from Thomas and then we'll move on, but it certainly applies to this work and others. Skill and art are not the same thing. The only real measurement of art is astonishment. And it's a word that we did use in describing and responding to this piece. Next image, please. Into a totally different universe. Probably more than 35 years ago, we went to Mexico to look for and acquire, if we could, and we'd set aside money to buy the Oaxacan small figures that were so fresh and unique. And by the time we got there, we realized that the marketplace had distorted the originality of the pieces and created a more manufactured product. Fortunately, Allie Clift, who was an artist that we were working with, spent the winters in Oaxaca and directed us to an artist named Marco Abarca, who had gone to university and had a degree in sculpture, was working on his own, no studio. He was working in his dining room, on his dining room table, and creating these wonderful visual myths. So we've just chosen one of those. Somewhat sadly, indeed sadly, he became ill maybe 6 or 8 years ago and has not been able to work since then. But over the years, one brief story, we were intending to send him money in order to allow him to buy the materials to do the pieces. And I asked him for his bank account number. He sent me a number and we sent the money and it was rejected. It turns out that he gave us a safety deposit box number, so it didn't quite work. But eventually we were able to send him money so that he could then buy the materials in order to create the sculptures. And I would guess now we still have in the gallery maybe 15 or 20 of the pieces, every one of them as unique as this. So I'm going to ask Rusty if you can begin just briefly speaking about the Song of the Owl.
Well, there is evidently a poem that this is based on, maybe loosely based, by Pablo Neruda. I think we can show a picture of it eventually. But what he did was, if we will show a close up of this woman, but I think the poem itself is written on her body. Um, Marco had an incredible imagination, and most of his pieces have some sort of a myth attached to them. You never really know whether it's an Aztec myth of reality or whether he's distorted it or added to it or created it on his own. But they're just phenomenal pieces. And Bernie and I went a second time to Mexico, met with him, met with his wife, and neither of us speak Spanish, and his English is quite limited, but we still had a wonderful time there. And he had this place where he would go to get the wood, and they were all different kinds of woods, from hard mahoganies and others. And he would just go and get different pieces of wood, and whatever his ideas were, he would create it. He created a number of pieces with his wife's jewelry, and she spoke remorsefully about having lost earrings and other kinds of things to become part of his sculptures. But he would do, whatever I feel like Sam, whatever comes into his artistic consciousness would become a piece, and he would just create it. And they are absolutely phenomenal. He happened to, I guess he knew that I was in vitro fertilization at one time, and he created an entire sculpture about the series of fertilization from sperm to egg to embryo to fetus, and put it all inside of an apple. And unbeknownst to me, and then it showed up, and I said, "Oh my God, that's for me. I need to have that." But he created the whole. He must have gone to a library and found all these different phases of early embryos. But he was just an incredibly creative, very funny individual. And Bernie says it's a tragedy that he had an illness and now doesn't work. But the craftsmanship of the carving and the creativity of the assembly. Sam, we put a pair in there just for you, but his assemblage is just truly amazing.
Do we have a detail of this as well, Caroline? There you go. Okay, so
There's the poem that we could see how tiny it must have been, how delicate.
that is the Pablo Neruda poem as translated. I'm not totally sure what the association necessarily may be, but it's microscript. And then an owl does appear in the poem. So there's an owl with this instrument. So it's almost as if he's taken the poem and then created a dream out of the poem. It's in a box form as well. So, Mara, would you have thoughts about this?
Well, I would just like to add that he's working in a surrealist tradition. And the great Remedios Varo and Leonora Carrington were in Mexico. They too fled Europe between the wars or right at the start of World War II. Remedios Varo was a member of the same group of surrealists that Andre Breton was before she went to Mexico. And she painted a lot of owls, as did Leonora Carrington. And so I'm not sure about the owl as a period of history or a particular motif in Mexico, because I don't know enough about Latin American art on its own to comment on that. But what I see is a long tradition of these dreamlike mergers of the animal world and the spirit world and the physical world in the surrealist tradition. Very exciting to me, because they're ambiguous and yet they are flights of fancy at the same time. So anybody can tell their stories. It's fabulous.
Sam, do you want to add anything
The
before we move on?
ambiguity is the very right word about that. This is a whole universe of popular art, of very expressive art that exists and is being underappreciated. The famous painter Dubuffet had a very big collection of art in the spirit of this work, and he wanted to give it as a gift to the state, to France, And Franz said, no, this is not real something art. So he offered it to Switzerland. And Switzerland has a most extraordinary museum in Lausanne, which is called le Musée de l'Art Brut. And there are so many brothers and sisters of his that create art. I must say, if anyone goes to Switzerland and wants to and asks me, what should I see there? I'll say, okay, the fantastic museums, you will have all the Monet and Van Gogh and whatever. But go first of all to see L'Art Brut, because there are extraordinary artists that somehow did not belong to what is consecrated, and there are worlds to discover. And he has a world of his own, but it is a world that belongs to humanity.
That was just lovely, Sam.
Sorry?
Your comments were just lovely. You know, it is a
Oh,
world,
thank you.
you know, his world is a world that belongs to humanity. So
Yeah.
these group of artists who are outside the canon,
Yeah.
that they're creating something that belongs to humanity. I love that idea.
I mean, the exhibitions that I saw there were so extraordinary. I really feel privileged that I lived in Switzerland for about 10 years, and I was able to be 2, 3 times a year in the Musée de l'Art Brut.
Wonderful. Let's move on to the next piece, Rusty, and I'm going to ask you to begin talking about it since you and I together included Stephen Althouse's work in the gallery maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, Stefan is my age, and he actually went to school close to where I went to school, although we never met one another. And we had lots of things in common to talk about. But his work is unique for a number of reasons. These are photographs, and so you think of him as a photographer. However, all of his early work and study and creations were around sculpturing. And at some point, he figured he had to take pictures of his sculptures to create a portfolio. And as he was making pictures, he got totally drawn into photography and capturing images. He then said the images, to have meaning for him, he put them together in different ways. But this piece, in its largest iteration, is about 8 feet wide. He makes somewhat smaller, 2 smaller versions of this, but he likes the largest version of it because of the emotion that the size brings. He does then a wonderful process of using large format camera, all natural light, and he takes multiple pictures of these creations. He puts all this together. This is all formulated by him, and then uses the computer to merge those photographs so that every piece of the photograph is in sharp focus. If you were to use natural light, you have to keep things open too much. You end up with a depth of field that's quite short, and the front would be in focus, the back would not. But by merging photographs on a computer, he can keep every detail. So if you get up close to this, you can see every thread in the cloth. So that's his technique. He then prints this digitally on a very large, the largest roll of paper that you can use to make this large image. But as important, or maybe more important than that, is what it takes for him to create an image. And there's an emotional quality to all of his images. He's very close with a group of Amish in Pennsylvania where he lives. He is not Amish, but very close to them. This particular image came about because he was very close to one of the leaders of the Amish community. That person would come to him and sort of say, what am I going to do about computers in my community, or phones, or things of that sort? Because the Amish have very strong feelings about how their lives should be managed and avoid some of the complexities that we all think are important that they don't. And this individual and he were fairly close. And one day that individual was helping another group of people chop down a tree that was no longer viable. It's going to be used for wood, and it fell on and killed him. And this is a piece that he put together in the emotion of that memory. You see the shroud-like material, and he uses that a fair amount. And the old wheel, which came off of an old wagon. He also then photoshops onto the wheel, in this case, or other pieces that he thought it could be a rake, it could be a hammer. He does all individual things, but he photoshops words that can be German, they can be Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Deutsch, Latin, Spanish. And the phrases are meant to make you think something more or think more about what you're seeing and trying to put those two things together. Um, and there's a depth that comes from trying to do it. It's also, you can't, if you look at this, you wouldn't know where those words are. You have to pay attention to get to the words. So he really wants you to look in, engage. And in this particular case, the translation of the, do we have the close-up of that? We can come back to the outside, but we have a close-up, I think. See, that's all photoshopped in. You can see the words now. He said it would have been a lot easier to carve the wood than the amount of time it took him to Photoshop so that it looks like every letter is carved into the wood. He has to make sure it fits just right. But this was something to the extent of where shall I turn? The woods are barren of leaves. And this is just his remorse at having lost a very close friend. So this is just one example of Stefan's work, all of which are, as I said, generally very large, but also very emotional. They draw you in ways that you might not expect. So it is photography for sure, but it is something more than capturing a sort of a landscape or a group of people or something. These are all single images of things. Might be a wagon, might be a wheel, might be a shovel. He also, interesting, uses Braille. So it's obviously Photoshop Braille, which is even more ironic, right? I mean, you can't read a photograph out of Braille because it doesn't have any depth to it. So the idea that somehow you're going to be able, as a blind person, to read a photograph. But again, the whole idea of stop, look, think, what's happened here. And his photographs are just amazing that way.
Mara, your thoughts as a museum educator with a piece like this?
Well, I do remember the buckboard wagon that he had inscribed. I forget the word, but it was such an arresting image. And I'm quite taken with these. I think the close-up actually gives you an idea of what it's like to see this work in person, because if you go back to the close-up, Carolyn, and again, on a technical level, going in and being able to keep an entire photograph in such crisp detail, but the shroud that underlies everything that has been sort of ritualistically torn and then tied in the corners, almost like it's a prayer shawl. But I mean, just look at the weave in there.
Mm-hmm.
You can see not only the warp and the weft, but you can see the pattern within the warp and the weft. You can see the twist of the thread, which gives you the highlighted side of the thread and the darker side of the thread, the duller side of the thread. And so going through this, it's a beautiful, symmetrical, hand-hewn wheel, the wheel of life, the turn of the seasons, the woods are barren of leaves. Where do I turn during this time, this time when Persephone is down below the ground in Hades. And there's a rhythm structure in all of his pieces that has equipoise, but it still implies movement. It's quite extraordinary how the duality of materials, of scale, of detail, of composition is both dynamic and restful at once.
That's beautifully said. There will be a show of his, of the large format pieces. in Lakeland, Florida, actually, at the museum that is there in the fall. And one of the nicest things, even when we had the show in the gallery, is that each one of the large format pieces is arresting, so that people actually took time, as we are now, in looking carefully at each one of the pieces. And they do have an impact that is really extraordinary for ordinary objects that are transformed into that which is extraordinary. On to the next image, please. So, Caroline, can you begin? This is a relatively recent piece of Hongwei Li, or Li Hongwei, who is Chinese born with a very large studio in Beijing, just recently rebuilt of 50,000 square feet. It's a combination of porcelain and stainless steel that I don't know the right word, wavers. You can move it. It is solid enough on its base to swing back and forth. So good luck, Caroline.
Well, I'd love to point out that that tilt is very intentional to the piece. There is a designed weight in it that keeps it in that point. It does obviously is rounded bottom, so it will wobble. I think it was the only thing in the gallery to give a little shake when there was the small earthquakes. It gave a little wiggle, but it's fairly large. I mean, it's over a foot in its longest dimension, and it is stainless steel meets porcelain. And Hongwei being from China, that has a very, very rich, prominent history in porcelain, meets New China with the stainless steel. That's kind of where I think Hongwei is getting at these pieces. It's in close relation to his allegory of balanced pieces. I think this came after those, but it's kind of this idea of what comes first. Can't help but think of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I know he has a lot more there, but I think that pairing actually kind of makes sense when it's something very old meets something very new. And to complement the porcelain, that is crystalline growth in the glaze there. So those are not drawn in, they're not ginkgo leaves. It's part of the glaze chemistry that he works with specifically.
Thank you much for that. Sam, your thoughts about this?
I must say, maybe I see in it things which he did not want to say. I mean, I go beyond now the question. It's a perfection of extraordinary combination of ceramic and steel. But I look at it and then I see those below those smileys. They float in a space, the green smileys with open eyes and so on, in spite of the fact that they live under a very rigorous control made of steel. This makes me think of China. This makes me think that maybe China is giving the world I don't know, a proposal of a system in which society can function, in which it is not very normal to have full liberty. I mean, we kind of dream of liberty, but we know, Rusty, you know that the body doesn't have full liberty. There are always doctors that say, "Ah, well, you try to die? No, no, no. I will give you this medication and you will live longer." So liberty is not really ours. There are systems that control us. So I look at it and I have all these thoughts that maybe are more a projection of myself than what the artist tried to include. But this is the risk that every artist takes. He proposes something, and then people dispose of it, and they say about it, and they see in it, and sometimes it is wonderful to have these feedbacks. So I hope that the creator, that Lee, is not offended by what I said.
My guess is he definitely will not be. One of the things we have learned in working with him now for 7 years is an extraordinary openness to those who take his work seriously. So I think he would just enjoy it enormously. Can we
Bernie,
Yeah.
it's very, going a little further with what Sam said. Normally, this piece would rest on its stainless steel, right? Normally, you want to make a piece that moves, that rocks. You want to put it on its most solid bases, it should be on the steel and the porcelain should be above. So and the steel should be the heaviest, and now the porcelain body is actually the heaviest. So it's a really interesting contrast. And if you look at the glaze, I mean, the glaze drips up. It doesn't drip down. So this whole thing in some way has been inverted from what one might expect. And to me, as a result, it's a very fascinating sort of thing to look at. He also works a lot in balance. Those great big pieces now that have different structures attached to them are all considered around balance. This is balanced, but it moves. This is moving balance. So you can rock this, but it's balanced in the sense it will not turn over, it will not flip, but it moves. His other pieces are balanced, but they do not move. So this is a wonderful, small, little inverted concept of joy.
I love it. And just for those in New England, in 2026 or early 27, there'll be a large installation of his work at the Peabody Essex Museum, where there will be pieces that are 6 to 8 feet large for that show. The other nice thing is that by using the 5,000-year-old material of porcelain, combining it with the stainless steel, that he's actually blending the past and the present in a quite extraordinary way. Next slide, please. So this is for me to begin with, just as a tribute to Jerry Garson, who passed many years ago. He was one of the first artists that we exhibited after we opened and were showing the works of artists of Israel. And we did his first show, and he and his wife, Lois, came to me and said, "Thank you." And I, "Sorry, what did you say?" They said, "Thank you for showing my work so beautifully." We'd done a small catalog and so forth. It turns out that they had had a gallery of their own in New Haven and knew how hard it was to have a gallery exist for any length of time whatsoever. Jerry studied the color theory with Joseph Albers after having been educated at Hopkins, and realized that the theory was important to him and the balance of color, but he was not interested in perpetuating the square, which Albers did. And these pieces, and this particular one, is just an homage both to color and to joy and affirmation of life. So that's my brief response to it, and also to the friendship that Jerry brought to us in such a profound way. Marla, your thoughts?
Well, it is such a piece of the 70s to me, by tilting it onto the diamond instead of the rectangle. But I love the play of positive and negative, that he chose white porcelain. So it is a still life, but it is a still life that is about overabundance. It's spilling beyond the containers of the table. It's spilling beyond the containment of the frame. And I just love seeing how that white sets up the positive and negative dynamic. And I would love to draw everybody's attention to his tonal values in creating volume, keeping them both flat and with volume at the same time, not realistic volume by any stretch of the imagination. That overall pattern and decoration moment that he's celebrating.
Wonderful. Sam?
Mara said it beautifully. I mean, this is a painting that the more you look at it, the more you discover the beauty of these positive, negative things, of the things that, the colors that come in to the front and that go retreat to the back. I would like to see this painting hanging in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, next to a Cézanne, next to a Matisse. For me, this is one of his most extraordinary paintings, and the more I look at it, the more I love it, and I see a whole world here. Students of art should look at it and see what they can explore. It invites to a lot of exploration in art. It is really something that vibrates with vitality. I simply love it. What can I say?
I think that's more than enough. And it is the way that I think Jerry related to making the pieces. He would always finish a show and then it would take him 3 or 4 months to start again because he began with a blank canvas and it became intimidating. And then once he got into the flow of it, then it proceeded in quite an extraordinary way. But it is filled with, it is a tribute to joy. Next image, please. Another, in fact, the book that we published on Mark Davis is called The Joy of Movement. And Rusty, if you could speak just a bit about it.
Sure. Hey, Mark, of course, Calder will come to everyone's mind when you look at early, especially early Mark Davis works, but Mark has his own voice now in a remarkable way. He's a joyous individual to meet. He's one of his favorite things to do, and he did for me, was to do a piece for our home. He came to our home and looked and did a commission piece based on color and things of that sort. Given whatever he wants to do in terms of making it, but colors and making things sort of blend with other things. So he's an amazingly creative person that way. He started originally with the traditional sort of hanging from the ceiling mobile, and now has really perfected the hang on the wall, the side of a wall, and project out type of a mobile. He's made a mobile as large as what I saw in the Harvard Museum yesterday, a very large foundry-made mobile that's I guess, Bernie, it's in the Children's Hospital in Chicago, I think.
Right. The Lurie Children's Hospital, exactly.
So scale-wise, he'll make one that's 3 inches tall. So his breadth of expression is enormous, but the joy he has, and you'll see it. I mean, look at the colors in this. Look at the shapes. Look at the dynamic positioning. All of that, and he brings it together with piece after piece after piece. That is, it's enticing. It's enhanced your excitement about observing it, because it again, like many other good pieces of art, it draws you in, but through so many different directions. Something might move on one side. Another issue you see here, not as the major focus, but look at the shadow on the wall. And so when you light Mark's pieces, if you have an interest, there's a whole nother experience based on the shadows that can be created, and the movement then makes the shadows move. So you have the piece, you have the colors, you have the shadows. It's really a wonderful process to observe many of his pieces. But again, as an individual, he's just a fabulous individual to work with.
It's a nice way to go back to the joy of movement, because when this moves just with a subtle breeze, you also have the movement, not only of the color in the pieces, but also the shadow behind it. So there's a kind of visual rhythm that comes out of these pieces. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if in advance we warned people that this would definitely not take only an hour, but we're clearly continuing with a number of other pieces that we've chosen, and not with apologies, but just a sense of joy. Sam, you're definitely.
I love here the two things put together, because one shows us an idea of human architecture. This small water lily bowl reminds me Rome, and near Rome, where there are still those viaducts. And then I go to this landscape here, where there are those two urns that somehow reflect that. One of them is still in a good position. It has a plant. The other one is already kind of falling apart. It's leaning. It's on the left of the painting. I don't know if it's a metaphor of the Democratic Party today. And then there is the dark triangle, dark triangle of trees, and in those trees we see the horizon of a sky. So it's a painting that invites us to go beyond the old stuff that is decrepit, and go into and go towards a sky that is shining. So it's a painting that invites me to enter. And what can I say? I love the combination. And I have one of his works that I see every day, which is beautiful. I enter it. Um, he really invites people to enter their paintings, and this is extraordinary.
Caroline, a little bit about at least the pot, if not the painting.
Well, together they just remind me that you can use the pots. I know that the Unda, which also could be Unta with a T, they would expect these to be used. This is a size you could very well put a beautiful arrangement of flowers on your porch. Um, that being said, it looks, what I love about the Unda, I'll say, especially these big pieces, it's thrown immaculately. It's actually, I think one time I called Rusty over and said, please help me pick this up. And he picked up right away. And I thought, yeah, that's not as heavy as I thought. And I realized they designed the rim to give this beautiful weight, but they actually make the whole pot light and functional. They're not heavy at all. They're quite beautifully designed and very intentional. That's what I love about them.
And the installation of the show, as Ian has done it, has this pot not too far from Jeff's painting. So again, and that's only by chance that we ended up choosing this pot to be in the show. The joy of the Onda pieces has been a dealer in Kamakura who just passed away. So the chances of us being able to get additional pieces are somewhat limited. We're trying to establish another source for it. But there is a simplicity and humbleness about the works of the community of Onda or Onta. And it's something that has enriched the gallery, particularly, especially because Mr. Shimaoka, a living national treasure, introduced us to the Mr. Kuno in Kamakura, and that relationship went on for probably 30 years. So having the privilege of doing approximately 6 exhibitions of their work has really been a joy. The next slide, please. Mara, if you could speak briefly about the Zulu beer pot, which was part of a collection of about 1,000 pieces that we own, having bought them between 1992 and 2002. So after apartheid ended, the blacks didn't want them because tin and plastic had replaced them, and the whites didn't want them primarily because blacks had made them. So almost all of the old pieces were either broken or in the Pucker Gallery in Boston. Mara?
So happy you have them.
Me.
This is a humble shape. It's a humble household pot. This is not fine art in the way we have looked at the other pots today or the other artists who are in your collection. And yet it does have a refinement. It doesn't have perfection, but it does have a refinement, and it has a directness. It's related to a gourd, which would have been the original drinking cup for someone. It would be a gourd, and it has the mountain range in it. It has dimensionality, the need to embellish. Once you're making something, you make something for function, but as society keeps moving on and growing, it doesn't take long before embellishment becomes part of the mandate of, well, if you're going to make it, how can we make it more beautiful? How can we make it mine? How can I bring my artisan's hands and my spirit and eyes into play, even if it is not mass produced in terms of machinery, but mass produced, it's production pottery essentially. So I find that very exciting. I also this inky blackness to it is just beautiful.
I would just add to it, it's really interesting. All these spots were produced, I mean, in the tradition of about 1,000 years. They were all done by women. They were all done in families where the mother would transfer the knowledge of making these household items. So there is something really quite extraordinary. The way it is an ancient object, even if it was made now, because it carries this long tradition of the Zulus. Besides, the ornamentations are really quite extraordinary, and they have something about them of what the Zulus were doing on their own bodies, making these signs, these decorations on their skin. And there is also something of their skin, because these pots were burned. I think they were fired twice, but the black color comes from some fat and some organic stuff that was worked into them by being polished. So there is something extremely touching in the fact that you know that so many hands have been constantly working on them. Not only the fire gave them the stability, but then the hands, the human hands, the creation of this. I have several of these pots thanks to Bernie, and they are radiating something humble, and to me personally, of course, something in the color of two of my grandsons who participate in African genetics and have a beautiful color of skin that I envy them very much.
That's so lovely. These were, as everyone has said, humble objects made by women, and they were not kiln fired, and they were not thrown on wheels. They were literally hand built, and then turned on a piece of slate. Then they were fired maybe for a day under palm fronds and dung. And then, as Sam indicated, they were burnished, and they're watertight, obviously, if they're beer pots. But we came across them in 1992 when we were in South Africa for a wedding. And I purchased, I think, 6 of them. The man sent them to me. And then I said, if ever you get any more like this, please send me photographs. This is when photographs preceded digital. And he sent me stacks of Kodak 4x6 prints. And we chose the pieces over a 10-year period of time. And of the 1,000 pieces, I think 3 broke in shipment. And all the rest of them became part of the gallery collection and now part of many museum collections, because it is the end of that. There are now South African clay artists being inspired by these, doing them as contemporary works, but not for use. Next slide, please. Rusty, if you have a thought about this piece, in that you own one of the prints, so
I,
you know it.
I thought this was fabulous. Alexandra does the majority of her photography on the Isle of Shoals. She's the caretaker there during the winter and is there by herself a great deal of the time, and has a plethora of conditions under which she makes her photographs. And this one being obviously a foggy afternoon or whatever it might be, morning, but a foggy time. But the contrast here is this boat with full sails, ghostly. It's not, again, wonderfully not centered, but off a little bit to the right. And then this very stark log that's very dark on the left. And the contrast, the ghostliness of the boat, and with the fog of this, whatever is the cloudiness of that, and then the definitive hardness of the log. Just, there's something about that contrast that makes this a very attractive photograph to me. She does a lot of wonderful photographs, some with snow, ice, obviously because of the time of the year that she's on the Isle of Shoals. She does other work as well. It's not the only work she does, but I happen to love this because I happen to love the sea and I happen to love the boat. And I love the way this particular photograph was captured, or if not the way it was printed, because there's something about it that really is enthralling to me.
Mara, your thoughts?
Well, the story itself, the foreground and the log being in sharper focus, deeper toned of the silver gelatin print. And it's an old-fashioned looking boat by comparison to what most people are running around the water with. Even sailboats have a very different look now than this older wooden boat. And it's pale, and the leavings through the veil of time, the timelessness of the ocean, the mist, the fading of the seafarer, the crossing of the bar of whomever is sailing the boat. I'd like to also point out that this image is 5 by 7.2. I mean, 7 by 7.2 inches. It's a very intimate scene, and yet the way she's dissolving the atmosphere, I feel like I could be in a panorama of, or out in the ocean itself, and being encompassed by how that mist feels against my body and how vast of the ocean. I'm going to have.
Mara, thank you. I'm going to just say that we'll move on to the next piece, but I do want to reemphasize the issue of scale in that. And finally, a work by Randy Johnston, whose works we've probably shown for 15 to 20 years now, an artist whose works I admired even well before that. And finally, one day he called and said, "Do you like my work?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And we began showing the work thereafter. And it's just been a marvelous opportunity to see Randy's work itself continue to grow within his own personal vision and his commitment to building forms, creating forms that don't necessarily have existed before, but then personalizing them each and every piece. So, Caroline, I'm going to ask you to speak, and then we'll go around and conclude.
I just fawn over Randy Johnston's work, probably because I was in the Midwest when I learned a lot of ceramics. But this piece in particular reminds me how many layers go into each of Randy's pieces. I would say a viewer is not burdened with that. It doesn't scream at you that he's put so much intention into the surface. In his WebinART, he actually, if you're interested, I think he says exactly what he does to get this effect. But they're just beautiful pieces. They're just livable, and they're just wonderful. I can't get over them ever. The wood-fired nature and his mark making, they just blend together in a beautiful symphony on his pots.
Sam?
There is a great humility in this work. It touches me. Somehow I see in it a painting. I see in it even something of Jackson Pollock. And there is something very simple in this piece of earth that becomes a vase, a pot. And then there is this incredible freedom of a hand that creates this kind of shapes that bring us back to nature. So there is earth and what grows on it that I see in this spot.
Nicely said. Rusty?
Randy Rusty, there we are.
R&R, rest and relaxation. Your turn.
It closes very well. We began with the universe of Brother Thomas, and then we zoomed into something small, very humble, very beautiful, and there is a spirit that somehow connects these things. So I think it's a beautiful closure.
It's Randy's work. I love Randy's work as a American stoneware potter. And we have all this incredible porcelain. Brother Thomas is American, obviously, but so much of the Japanese, Chinese, all of that is porcelain. This is stoneware, and it's heavy. His pieces are heavy, and they're wood-fired, as Caroline said. All of Randy's pieces, well, all of Randy's pieces that are vases with 4 sides to them have a different side relative in terms of how they look as you turn them around, because the fire hits them differently, and therefore you get, there's one that I call the 4 seasons, because it looks like winter, spring, summer, and fall based on how the fire has created the different aspects of each side. So Randy worked with Warren McKenzie, and this is very reflective of Warren's sort of heavier pieces as well. And Warren talked about, he didn't draw, he just diddled on the surface. I think Randy's much more, although very free, much more purposeful in how he makes the marks on his works. But they all reflect a humble joy almost. There's not a lot of angst in his works, and as a result, having them in your home is like a little light bulb. There's something that emanates from it that brings you joy.
I want to end by thanking everyone for your comments. I also want to address the notion of freedom that comes with 58 years of having discovered these pieces and the joy of being able to share them. Just the other day, walking through the gallery, and I just started smiling, and it may be a function of age, but I really was just delighted as I went room by room, saw the Garston painting up, saw Randy's piece, obviously Brother Thomas's, and realized the privilege and the gift of having been able to have the gallery for these many years. Finally, a quote from Thomas that I really like, and I think it says what this show is about and hopefully what we can continue to do. Perhaps we are made to look back just for the experience of being amazed as much by what we have done as by what we can still do. Thank you for sharing fine choices with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.